Hello, everybody. It is approximately 1:44 a.m. I guess I can't really sleep, as you can tell. My eyes are wide open. Well, we're going to talk about the Bible, of course, today. Bible and the church. Um, we probably have so much in our minds concerning the Bible, the written portion of the church, the written portion of the scriptures, and how to live by them and how to understand them, how to understand Jesus Christ is through understanding Scripture. Now, then we're having to tackle the whole issue of the logistics of Scripture. I mean, how did all those books come together? Did they just sort of, I don't know, just find their way into the people's hands? Well, let's take a look at some scripture passages, and let's take a look and see how what the scripture has to say about scripture. We can go to 1 Corinthians 11:2, probably one of my favorites. I won't deny that. It's in a nutshell says, hold fast to the traditions, which is really teachings. Traditions are teachings. So it's not that Jesus was against tradition. He was against false tradition. In other words, tradition that was made to burden people, rules, regulations, things of that nature. You couldn't walk a certain mile on a Sabbath, okay? Or you couldn't walk a certain, I don't think it was like yards or something like that. So basically, 1 Corinthians 11:2 says, hold fast to the traditions I handed on to you, be they by word of mouth or written letter. Now, people often will tell me, well, show me those oral traditions that Paul is talking about. Failing to understand and see that Paul is speaking within the church community, all right? He's speaking between himself and the leaders of the Corinthian church. If we recall a little fast forward, Clement had a problem with the Corinthian church, which is Pope Clement. He, recognized that Corinthians were having some problems. They were, just throwing out different leaders because they didn't like them, because they didn't like what they said. So there was always a tension in Corinth about different issues. But we fail to understand sometimes when we discuss oral theology, oral transmission of doctrine, of faith, is that it's within the confines of the church, between the church being the pillar and foundation of truth. That's what Scripture says it is. 1 Timothy 3:15. One of the most powerful scriptures I can point to. It exactly clarifies where the truth is. So how can the truth be in the church if it's written? And how can it be written if it's in the church? Well, that's what Scripture is about. Scripture is about people putting into print what they have experienced, what the church has gone through. And because of those issues, because of those different situations, the church then discerns which of those books needs to be present in the canon of Scripture. And it took a long time, virtually almost 400 years. There were so many disagreements among the early fathers of the church. Chrysostom, there was, major you know, should we include the Proto-Evangelium? Origen and Tertullian both really loved the Proto-Evangelium. And I believe, if I can recall, Cyril of Alexandria liked it too. But it didn't get in there. And it was a very Mariological, I mean, it's a book about, virtually a lot of interesting, teachings that could have come forth about Mary, which the church just deemed it wasn't an inspired text. All right. So it did not get into the canon, the full canon of Scripture. Some people will say, well, but you know what? Tobit doesn't belong there. Esther doesn't belong there, or other books of the Bible do not belong there. I believe Song of Songs is one of them. You have to really look at Book of Ezra. Doesn't belong there. I think that's renamed as another book of sorts. But I would venture to tell you that just because the Jewish people did not have those books included in their canon doesn't mean that the Christian church didn't have the discernment on its own to include those books into the canon. Those books were present in 397 AD. Okay, we're talking at least quite some time before the Reformation. So we have a Martin Luther come up and say, well, you know what? These books don't belong there. No, his argumentation was basically that they didn't, belong there because he said so. I mean, he set himself up as arbiter of the truth. One can agree that this is the way he chose to proceed. You cannot have anarchy, all right, anywhere, whether it's in government or religious institutions. Anarchy does not solve problems. It creates bigger ones, okay? So what we had here is 1,500 years later, or, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, maybe 1,100 years later, a man just deciding, for everybody else, that it's only going to be 66 books of the Bible. So basically throwing out all those books that were included in 397 at the Council of Carthage. It's kind of hard for me to understand how people today logically can accept that. How can you accept that? How can you accept one man telling you what to do? Think about it. One man deciding for you what you're supposed to believe. That's basically what happened. One man told you not to believe Jesus is present in a transubstantial way in the Eucharist. And you took it. You believed it. You just accepted it hook, line, and sinker. Because of what he wanted to demonstrate. Notice what I'm saying, okay? We don't accept doctrines of mere mortals. The church was created from the side of Christ. Okay, now that's poetic, so I'm not going to perhaps dwell on it that much. But for the Calvinist, who thinks logically and intellectually, has to come to a conclusion that there has to be order in the church. You can't just believe whatever you deem is doctrinally true. Everybody will, you know what I mean? Come on, look at our group. There are so many that believe this way, believe that way, and believe other ways. Excuse me, I just got a little cold there. I don't know how I get a cold. Well, it is still March, but I really want to ask you to think about that. Think about the fact of a Bible-only church. Does there really exist such a thing? In the Yellow Pages, we got the Presbyterians, which are all over the board, and you know, some are. Well, I mean, just think of it. I mean, there's Presbyterian USA. There's another Presbyterian church. I'm sure there's many others around the world that we don't even know about. I mean, you know, Wikipedia can probably answer that question. We have Lutherans. There are probably over 300 Lutheran groups in Western Europe. Yeah, true. Scottish, Swedish, and even within those countries, there are many differences. Those are very small differences, but do we have to, you know, in the Catholic Church, we have factions, but those are spiritual factions, all right? The institution stays on. You know, the whole faith is geared together in one unifying truth. In other words, everything that we believe today, which is presently taught through the Universal Catechism of the Catholic Church, can be found in the second and third centuries. You know, you can't look at the first and say, well, why isn't it in the first? The first is really the apostolic age. There was nothing. You have the scriptures. You know, you have, well, there were writings. There was the Didache in the 70 AD. There was, of course, Clement's letters in 90 AD. So correct me. So I've got to make a correction. We did have writings in the first century. But see, as we go on, well, getting back to this oral theological understanding, oral theology is always grounded in the church. Paul isn't just going hoi polloi and saying, you know, hold fast to the traditions you have received from us, be they by word of mouth or written letter, to anyone who's going to hear them. I mean, to say that everything that he's saying or writing is in the Bible already, he wouldn't have to, there wouldn't be a reason to say it, would it? Where about the other 10 apostles? Where were they? Why weren't they writing? Did you ever think about that? Did that ever enter your mind? Where were the other 9, 10 apostles? They went out preaching. They didn't go around writing. That wasn't their deal. Paul was the one mainly writing. He was called to that. But that doesn't mean that one man is going to create discontent. Do you know how many interpretations of Paul there are? Do you know how many, do you have any idea of how, if Paul thought that his writings would cause so much divisiveness, I don't think he would even put one word on paper. We wouldn't even have anything after the Acts of the Apostles. Honestly, I really don't. Paul was not that way. He was not a divisive person. He didn't say, he actually said, you know, don't listen to just, some follow Apollos, some follow me, some follow, you know, the Cephas, Peter, you know, others follow this and that, you know. and he's actually thankful he didn't have to baptize anybody. I don't know what that meant, but that's, he's trying to make a point that he's not the center of attention, and yet people are making him that. And what I'm trying to propose here is to think about the fact that 1 Corinthians 11:2 is actually written after Timothy. And to understand Timothy, you have to really understand that it is the church, it is within the church, within the church, that the writings of the apostles are to be understood, guarded, and accepted. So we cannot just simply, come back 1500, 1600, 1900, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. We can't come back, I just found out that there's a church from 1940s. It's a splinter group of the Pentecostal church, not the Oneness church. There's another church. It's called the Church of the Way. And my dear friend Brenda, that's not the church I'm thinking of. Okay, it's actually a very cultish church. It's originated in Ohio. You can actually look it up. I'll try to get a link for you folks. It was amazing. It was amazing. They're probably very closely related to the Jehovah's Witnesses, but they are somewhat different in their eschatological understanding of the church, hermeneutical understanding of the teachings, the integrity of the teachings of the church, the doctrinal portions, totally eliminating Christendom as we know it. I mean, even Protestantism, they just totally, forget about it. They don't even believe Jesus is God. Obviously, that would be respectfully. I have a lot of friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses. I love them very much, but we disagree. We believe that Jesus Christ is divine. He said so. He said so in more ways than one. And Paul said that as well. I'm into 17 minutes. I don't want to keep it too long. I want to go through some scriptures here. We have 2 Thessalonians 2:15. Again, hold fast to traditions, whether oral or by letter. We have 2 Thessalonians 3:6. Shun those acting not according to tradition. Again, teaching. We have something opened up here that I don't understand. My computer's going boo. I don't know what that was. All right. Well, anyway, well, we have. Let me finish with a writing from one of the early fathers of the church, Saint Athanasius, around the year 360 AD. Let us note that the very tradition or teaching and faith of the Catholic Church from the beginning, which the Lord gave, was preached by the apostles and was preserved by the fathers. On this was the church founded. And if anyone departs from this, he neither is nor any longer ought to be called a Christian. Tough words. That's the source of that is 4 letters to Serapion of Timaeus 1:28. And he goes on, actually Origen goes on, the teaching of the church has indeed been handed down through an order of succession from the apostles. and remains in the churches even to the present time. Of course, present his time, but could be our time as well. That alone is to be believed as truth, which is in no way at variance with ecclesiastical and apostolic tradition, and that is by a book that, or letters that he wrote in Fundamental Doctrines 1, Preface 2. So we have clearly early church witness that without the church, there is no salvation in essence. Now, that's not to say that, it's often been misunderstood what that means. What the church had to face was a lot of heresy at that time. Eastern heresy was just exploding all over the East. Romans, I don't know. They didn't really, actually, one of the Eastern Fathers actually said there has never been any heresy from the chair of Rome. That's true. I'm going to find that quote somewhere. It's pretty interesting. And it's been interesting all along. There's never been anything spoken by Rome. In other words, Roman authorities, the successor of Peter, even from very early on, that there was any heresy from that mouth that comes from the chair of Peter. And that is interesting. It's very interesting, because we know that several Eastern patriarchs were going through some difficult issues, things that happened, and bishops and etc. But it was all, at one point the church was all Arian. Arian was a priest. He came from the East and infected almost all of the church at one point, until there was a council that clarified Jesus is the Son of God. I think that was the Council of Ephesus that clarified that, and then the councils after that. So it's 22 minutes. I don't want to bore you folks. I think I kind of gave you a little bit of taste of some of this understanding. I'd like to just continue a little bit, just a few more scriptures. We got 2 Timothy 1:13, follow my sound words, guard the truth. Again, follow my words. What were those words? Well, Timothy himself said the pillar and the foundation of truth is the church, which is through the words, through the mouth. 2 Peter 3:15-16. Paul's letters can be difficult to grasp and interpret. What do we do with that one? Well, what about Romans 10:17? Faith comes from what is heard. Interesting. Now, of course, a lot of these scriptures are picked off, from various writings, but this is mainly a topic of Bible-only theology. Does it stand? Does it have a leg to stand on? Do we just basically go off of what men individually will tell us? If someone says to you something that the Bible says this and that, are you going to go and believe that? What reason are you going to have to believe that? Tell me. Put it on the post. Come on, let's do it. Let's get it on. If one man rose today and nailed 59 thesis on the Westminster Cathedral, which is actually a Lutheran cathedral, what do you think would happen? Oh, that person would be in trouble. You'd be in jail, desecrating the church. So, when they say that, the church burned the heretics, yeah, those were the days, but it wasn't the church, it was the authorities, the public church authorities. Very well may have been influenced by religious leaders and whatnot, but religious leaders didn't like the torch. They were public authority. They were all, they kind of had what Peter had. Let's take that sword and let's chop that ear off and maybe it'll go away, right? Wrong. Doesn't work that way. Sorry. So I want to end on this note. I guess I'm going to go 30 minutes, 26 already. We can't believe and trust everything anyone tells us. I don't care if it's Martin Luther, John Calvin, Zwingli, Moody, whoever. Don't tell me, my dear fellow Protestants, that all those men are to be believed. And yet every group of their followers believes they are the ones that hold on to the true faith, to the true understanding of the faith. Can't have it both ways. Can't accept Calvin without accepting Luther. Can't accept Luther without accepting Calvin. Can't accept Moody without accepting Zwingli. These were all men down through the ages, followed each other pretty much. Oh, they changed a few things in that, but we just can't have that. Come on, 1940, we had a man, doctor, again, I urge you to Google The Way, the Church of the Way. It's not a Christian church, or at least it doesn't have Christian teachings. I would encourage you to take a look at some of the current events that were going on in the past, 30, 40, 50 years. Keep reminding you of Jim Jones. He was an ordained minister. Now, surely people at that time, beginning, believed everything he said. He wore a collar. Oh, he was a big man. He was a teacher. What did he do at the end of it 3 years later? No, not like Jesus died for us. He killed 900 people, murdered them. Well, we need to be careful. We need to be cautious. The church laid her foundation. It's up to you and me to reach into that big pot of tradition. Yes, teaching that is grounded in truth, in fire, in blood and tears of the early church. And I'm going to discuss with you next time about who was present at the Council of Nicaea. It's going to astound you. Those weren't purple-clad, big-time prelates. Very broken down human beings. We'll discuss that later. That is going to be a very interesting discussion too. Who was present at the Council of Nicaea? I'm going to let you folks go and let you think about this. I'm going to hope that I'm going to see a few more posts. And answer me this question. Who are you going to believe next? Jesus Christ? The church that he founded? or the man next door.